I have a much larger photograph here where I can see all of the fine edges that need to be taken into consideration as I'm drawing. So you can either work from life or you can work from your photograph as long as it's nice and sharp, and you start to put in your contours that are supposed to be part of this flower. And I may change things a little bit now as I'm getting more accurate, because that first sketch is basically just that. It is a sketch to help you get to the final drawing. I'm really going to look at the details for how this thing comes together and get it drawn very, very accurately. Once you've got your orchid structure in, everything else is the same as the way you've drawn all your other subject matter. Always from simple to complex. Even when you're rendering, you're doing simple to complex. Now, as you can see, I have drawn a very careful drawing of the orchid based on the sketch that I had in the first step. I've also put in these markings on the petals themselves. Now, putting in these markings doesn't mean you just draw a bunch of circles. Look at the markings, the way that they appear, and draw them onto the line drawing. But don't just draw circles. They're not. If you look at them, they are specific shapes. They are certain sizes in relation to one another, and that's what you need to put into the drawing. What I've decided was I really like the profile of the orchid better than the back view, because the back view for this particular orchid is not terribly interesting. And I really wanted to show how much this labellum comes out from the flower and how sculptural this whole section really is, which you don't see in a front view. I'm going to mark off all these different things, where this petal starts from here, how deep this is, how far in this column starts, how far in this part of the labellum starts in relation to the edge of this, and mark all these things roughly so that I know exactly where I have to go with the sepals and petals. I've just marked off where the starting points for the sepals go, and you can see it's supposed to be a Y, but because of this change in perspective, it looks more like a T. These are the locations for the sepals. Now, the next thing I'm going to do from that same center point is I'm going to put in the other Y for the petals themselves. So this is the line for my labellum. This is the line for the far petal, and then this will be the line for the closest petal here. And this is the height of my closest petal. So this is my sketch from my frontal. Now I'm going to sketch for the side, and I can cut these apart, move things around, but at least I have some idea of where things are going to go. Now, as you're drawing, look at your lines and look at the relationship. Like if this is one curve, look at where this curve comes in relation to this. Look at where this comes in relation to this. Or vice versa. If you put this in, where does this belong here? And does it look right? You have to make an adjustment. But basically, if you look at things as shapes in relation to one another, you will get the correct placement for all of the elements. It's much easier to draw something when you look at them as shapes and divorce your mind from the fact that they're a flower. All right, so there's my first sketch. And now I'm going to do the fine line drawing that will go onto the composite composition. At this point, I've developed what I want my stem to look like. I think it's much more interesting than this straight on shot. And now I am going to place my profile view, which I think is going to go in about here. And then the straight on view is going to go in about here. So I will see a little bit of, and I can change the angle of this if I want, or move it in this direction. It's just the way that this comes in here matches the way this peduncle comes in on this flower in this direction. I can change it and tip it a little differently so that I can see the buds behind it and maybe slightly overlap them. So that's probably where we're going to put this one. And then this one, you can see these are my link lengths for where things belong. So this one probably, since we don't see that very much, I will probably place it somewhere in here and then change the direction of the stem that I have placed here and maybe move it closer to what this is doing in this direction, like so. And that should give me a pretty good composition for the full arrangement of this flower. Now I'm going to do a final pencil drawing, including really refining the details of these buds, which I haven't done. This was mainly to find out where my stem was going to be and how the flowers were going to attach to the stem. And that's a really important thing because you've got to make sure that these peduncles alternate on the stem itself. Now I'm ready to do a full composite composition for this orchid rendering. The final tracing is arranged and I am ready to transfer. I had to add another orchid flower because of the way that this stem and the structure of the flower works. If I had one facing this way, I had to have another one facing this way. And the distances between these flowers or florets are very close, so it really required that I add another flower. So I've added the back of an orchid to create the correct positioning. So now I'm ready. I'll transfer this and then I will redraw once I have it on good drawing paper, and then we will be ready to render. As you're about to transfer your drawing, look at the drawing itself in relation to the overall size of the page. Make sure that you don't have things going off into corners. Make sure it's not straight up and down, and unless that's the style of the flower. But think about how it places on the page. It'll be much better for the overall drawing if when you're ready to mat, that the thing is really in the position that it needs to be in. So it's kind of an aesthetic call, but give it some thought before you start to transfer. Now the drawing has been transferred to good drawing paper, and what I think should be done with this particular subject, I am going to start this by putting in all the darks first, and that way I can gauge how light to make the light areas. So as you can see, that's what I've started to do here. I'm going to render in all of the stems and maybe the center for the labellum and that area in there, and then I'll do some of these light sections after that, because that gives me a relative relationship as from dark to light to know just how light to make the light areas. So dark comes first in this situation, and I think that that's probably the way you should probably approach this as well.